Today we're going to talk about the process I use to restore quarter windows. So I'm going to use my last set here that I did as an example. These are currently on my turbo notch build that I have going. And although the glass was in amazing condition, the trim was pretty rough. You can see a nice rash mark here on that trim. And then both of them had the usual paint fade and lots of pitting, so they definitely needed to be fixed up. So your first step, and ideally this should be done off the car, is you want to protect your glass, so tape it up. I also have a little cardboard trim. The cardboard is for my epoxy. I use epoxy as my filler to repair all those blemishes and pitting. And what the cardboard does is it acts as a bridge. It doesn't allow the epoxy to run off, and if I need to add more epoxy, it'll let it build up. So I'll let the epoxy sit for 24 hours and then I'll start the sanding process. I think it's important for me to note that even before you start anything, you should have a pair of rubber gloves on, and that's going to prevent any oils being transferred from our hands onto the quarter windows. As far as the sanding process, this step here goes, this is the most important process. This is the most important step in the process, because whatever you do here is going to show throughout the rest of the steps. So ideally, you want to sand and smooth your repairs and blend them in flawlessly, because you don't want to leave any ridges. It doesn't matter how many coats of primer or top coats of paint you put on it. If there's a ridge there, it's going to show. So you got to be super picky and just keep sanding over and over until you're completely satisfied. As you can see in the video, I use a flashlight as well. Although I have excellent lighting in the garage, the flashlight will just highlight any further imperfections. So I'll just keep working that. You got to be patient here. This is it's very time consuming and at times frustrating. Also important to have your blowgun going just to get rid of the excess dust before you do any spraying. Once you're happy with your sanding, then you can start the priming process. I use the Duplicolor primer filler, and I'll throw on a first light coat and then let it sit. And then I'll come back and throw on another coat. You want to put on at least 2 coats before you start any sanding. So at this stage here, what you want to do is build up the primer, take a look at your trim, and then if required, you're going to sand lightly in between. Don't sand the primer too early. I let it sit for about an hour, and then I'll start the sanding. I'll use a light gray Scotch pad and just lightly sand any imperfections. And all you're doing is refining the the primer here. You build up the primer, you sand it, and we're just trying to even everything out. So how many times you do this is going to depend on the condition of your trim. So you may need to do that sand fill several times. You may need to do it only once or twice. That's what you're gonna have to assess as you go. So on my last coat here, I try not to sand on the last coat, but sometimes you're gonna need to do it. For me in this case, I applied my last coat of primer, and I was happy with it, so I didn't touch it. After the primer's done, I let the primer sit for 24 hours, and then I'll come back, take another look at it. If I see it does need a little sand, I'll touch it up. If it doesn't, then I'll start top coating. Top coating, I'll use 3 coats. I know a lot of guys like that SEM trim black, but I continue to use, I really like this Rust-Oleum satin black painter's touch. I've used this on all my trim. It holds it very well, and it comes out exactly the finish that I like. So here's the finished product from my process, which is basically 3 days worth of work condensed into a 5-minute video. Hope you guys found it useful. If you have any questions, comment away. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, thanks for watching.